Hi there, it's Erin Harner, gut health and IBS dietitian. And today I want to dive into constipation with you because constipation is a hot topic. I ask the question, like, what's the number one thing I can support you on, or what your number one struggle is? And many of you say constipation or IBS-C, which is irritable bowel syndrome with constipation. So I want to dive in today into 11 reasons why you're constipated. All right, let's go. According to the NIH, National Institute of Health, their definition of constipation is that it's a condition in which you may have fewer than 3 bowel movements a week, stools that are hard, dry, or lumpy, stools that are difficult or painful to pass, or a feeling that not all stool has passed. So incomplete emptying is another way to describe this. So if that's you, tune in. This is going to be super, super enlightening for you. I promise. Because if I had known even like 1 or 2 of these things when I was struggling with constipation, literally since I was a child, it would have been such a game changer for me. I would not have struggled for years and years and years and years dealing with food sensitivities and skin issues, chronic eczema, and like having to put socks on my hands so I didn't scratch my arms and my legs when I went to sleep. Like, it was awful. So if you're struggling with constipation, I get it. I was there for years and years, and it hasn't been a problem for years for me because I fixed my gut. I solved the problems. And many of the things I'm going to share right now are reasons why you may be constipated and why I was too. All right, let's start with this. Constipation is super common. The problem that we don't know a lot of other people around us are constipated is because people typically don't talk about poop, right? Like, hey, how's your bowel movements going? It's not like a typical conversation starter. So many of us are just, we don't know if we're constipated, right? The definition is that you have less than 3 bowel movements a week. I would actually say that anything less than 1 bowel movement a day is less than optimal. So we want you going to the bathroom at least once a day. And the reason is your poop, your bowel movements, is one of the ways that your body takes out the trash. A lot of the waste, the bacteria, the parasites, the fungi, all the stuff that your body doesn't want, it goes out through 3 routes: your urine, your sweat, and your stool. So we want to make sure that your stool, your solid waste, is getting taken out regularly. It's like if you kept putting trash at the corner or at the road or at the kind of the road or your driveway, waiting for the trash man to come and take away the trash, and no one ever came. It just kept piling up and piling up, piling up. You would have a lot of problems, right? Bugs, and it would smell, and it would be gross, and there would be rodents, and all sorts of things would happen. And the same thing happens with your stool. If your body doesn't take out the trash regularly, we have a problem. But let's talk about why this may not be happening regularly for you. I'm going to give you 11 reasons, because it's really important to understand why it's happening so we can find some effective solutions for you. All right, number 1, lack of fiber. Anyone who's had constipation has gone to the doctor, and their doctor has said, eat more fiber. Like, what does that even mean, right? What does that even mean? So fiber helps move waste through. We've got soluble fiber, we've got insoluble fiber, we have resistant starches, we have all sorts of things. Bottom line, we need to be eating more fruits and vegetables, whole grains, leafy greens, things that have fiber. If you're eating a processed food diet devoid of fiber, that's problem number 1, and one of the easiest fixes in this list. So number 1, lack of fiber. Number 2, dehydration. So if you aren't adequately hydrated, everything gets dehydrated, including your poop, and then it gets stuck. So you need to make sure that you're drinking adequate amounts of water. One really easy biomarker to tell is looking at your urine, actually. So if your pee looks like lemonade versus apple juice, you're well hydrated. It should look like lemonade. It should be clear. You want a little bit of color to it. We don't want to overhydrate, but you also don't want it to look like apple juice or be very, very dark. And sometimes supplements and medications can change the color of urine, so that's not always the best way to do it. But that's one way to tell if you're hydrated. That's very simple and easy that anybody can do. Bottom line, make sure you get plenty of water. Hydration should come from water. Pure, clean, filtered water is ideal. You don't want to bring in a whole bunch of toxins and phthalates and all the stuff that comes in water. So ideally, you drink filtered water, you keep your water in a glass or a stainless steel water bottle, and you carry on with your day, making sure that you're well hydrated. So those are 2 pretty easy fixes, right? Lack of fiber and dehydration. So start there. Next thing would be a sedentary lifestyle. If you're not up and moving, we see constipation. So one of the things that drives motility in your GI tract, actually all the way down from mouth all the way through, is movement. So this is why a short walk after dinner is especially helpful before you wind down for bed, because it gets things moving. It helps with motility. So if you find yourself, I know one of the things that I was recently on a 3-week trip with my family, and on the days where we were sitting in the car for hours and hours and hours and hours, and there was not a lot of opportunity to get up and move around, I would definitely notice my body start to get backed up a little bit. So I would make sure whenever we stopped at a rest area or we stopped for a break that I would get up and I'd walk around, and that definitely helps get things moving. All right, next up. Those are 3 pretty easy ones. Those are the ones that your doctor may have told you, drink more water, increase fiber, make sure you're moving, right? Those are the pretty easy ones. All right, next we're going to move on to medications. So medications is one of the most underappreciated, most common, biggest issues for constipation. So in my practice, when I'm working with clients or in my program, the Gut Balance Method, I work on a timeline. So I ask questions like, when did the issue start? When did you start taking medications? When did you start taking supplements? Because oftentimes I will see constipation correlate when a medication was begun. So some examples of pretty constipating medications, certainly your narcotic drugs, things like opioids, codeine, antihistamines is a big one, especially in during hay fever season, like spring and fall, when there's a lot of histamines in the air, or a lot of pollen in the air. A lot of people take antihistamines and they'll notice they get constipated, but they don't know why. So antihistamines is a big one. Motrin, antispasmodics, which are often prescribed for people with IBS. So antispasmodics can actually reduce motility and cause constipation. Antidepressants, direct effect on the gut. Blood pressure medications, certain classes of blood pressure medications, and many, many more. So read the fine print on your prescription medications and see if constipation might be a side effect. That's a big one for a lot of people. And it's much easier to transition to a different medication or talk to your doctor, right? See if you can transition to a different medication that has less of a constipating effect. And that might solve your problem, right? Sometimes it doesn't have to be super complicated. All right, another one is supplements. And this is another underappreciated one for constipation. I'll often see, somebody goes to their doctor and they'll have an iron panel drawn, or their iron is low and they start taking iron supplements and they get constipated and they don't put 2 and 2 together. We haven't looked at the timeline. So iron supplements are constipating, and so are calcium supplements. So if you're worried about bone health and you're taking calcium, make sure that you're paying attention. There are certain forms that are less constipating, and combining calcium with magnesium really helps with the constipating effect of calcium. So those supplements can also be constipating. Also, like multivitamins that have high doses of iron or calcium can also create some problems. All right, let's talk about diagnoses. So certain diagnoses directly impact constipation. The biggest one I would say is definitely Hashimoto's thyroiditis or hypothyroidism. So if your thyroid, a little butterfly-shaped gland right in your throat here, if that is underfunctioning, and it's very, very common to underfunction in women in particular, way disproportionate women to men. If the thyroid is underfunctioning, we have a problem because everything gets low and slow. So making sure that your doctor checks your thyroid, and not just TSH, but a full thyroid panel. And that's something I definitely talk with clients about in the Gut Balance Method program, is making sure that certain basic labs are checked, because most doctors don't think to do this. They don't correlate a gut issue with a thyroid problem. And they are very, very much correlated. So that's something that you can be the driver of your health, and you can ask and be a proponent for yourself, and to ask for things like a full thyroid panel and not just TSH if you're concerned about your thyroid. Other things like diabetes definitely impact motility and gut function, definitely slow things down. Multiple sclerosis is another one. And there's other things like Parkinson's, very, very, very common to have slow motility. So certain diagnoses definitely can be correlated, but addressing the diagnosis or addressing the symptoms associated with that diagnosis will help with the constipation. Disordered eating. So if there was disordered eating, so anorexia, bulimia, binge eating in your past history or present, that can definitely contribute to constipation as well. Slow motility caused by gas and bloating. So this is a big one. And this one is so hard because it's cyclical. So very often people with irritable bowel syndrome, I see this all the time, where everything gets slow, right? Things get moving slowly. Your body's not taking out the trash. Things start to ferment that shouldn't be fermented, or bacteria start to develop. Fungi, parasites, all sorts of unsavory microbes in your gut start to create things like methane gas or hydrogen sulfide. And methane in particular is very, very damaging to the gut because it paralyzes the gut peristaltic action. So the gas, methane in particular, is associated with constipation. And it's sort of a double-edged sword because when your body's producing, or when the microbes in your gut are fermenting fibers, producing methane gas, it slows everything down. And then it causes more constipation. So that's a problem. So we want to make sure that we figure that out and address it. So a couple different names for that. So intestinal methanogen overgrowth, or IMO, is the more current term for it. The previous term would be sort of methane predominant SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So definitely gas and bloating can paralyze the gut lining, can paralyze the peristaltic action of the gut, creating constipation. So unless you actually address the SIBO, how are we supposed to get rid of the constipation? And these are some of the things that I address in my course and my program, The Gut Balance Method. Let's talk about damaged microbiome. So this is number 9. So a damaged microbiome is a problem. So your microbiome, that is all of those things that I was just talking about, the fungi, the yeast, the parasites, the bacteria, mostly bacteria, that are in your large intestine, in your colon. The doctor's not going to see these things on a colonoscopy, right? These are things that they're microscopic, right? Usually we assess them via a DNA test and not with a microscope. Much harder to detect parasites, in particular with a microscope. So like an OMP that your doctor might order, probably not going to find much because it's very, very difficult to see them, if they're even there, if they came out at that time in your stool. So I use DNA-based microbiome analyses to figure out what's going on in the gut. So that really helps. A damaged microbiome, so basically disproportionate amounts of like Bacteroides to Firmicutes, for example, will definitely change your motility. And when this happens, we get food sensitivities. So things that used to be able to eat, can't eat anymore. We get leaky gut or intestinal hyperpermeability because we have a whole bunch of stuff that shouldn't be there getting through between the cells versus through the intestinal lumen, and causing all sorts of immune system issues. So a damaged gut microbiome, also sort of circular, leads to food sensitivities, a leaky gut, or intestinal hyperpermeability, which just sort of completes the chain. And it just kind of keeps happening until you stop the cycle and you address what's actually going on. Number 10, pelvic floor dysfunction. So this is something that I see not super often, but sometimes when I hear people are straining to go to the bathroom. So if you're having constipation and you're pushing and you're straining, but your stool is actually soft, makes me wonder, do we need to see a pelvic floor physical therapist? This might not actually be a motility issue. This might be an issue with the muscles in your pelvis. Sometimes when you go to the bathroom, or try to go to the bathroom, there's a good stool in the rectum, but the muscles aren't relaxing to allow it to come out. So that can happen. Pelvic dyssynergia is one diagnosis. A rectocele is another, where there's like outpouching or pushing, right? There's a lot of potential things that can happen. But again, you're not going to see this on a colonoscopy. So pelvic floor dysfunction is definitely something that I see sometimes with constipation. If we've addressed all the things up above and nothing has helped, this might be the next step. We need to actually retrain the muscles of the pelvis to release the stool. And last but not least, I want to talk about stress. So stress absolutely is related to constipation. How? Because it affects the GI tract through the vagus nerve. So your gut and your brain are connected through the vagus nerve. And about 90% of the signals traveling through the vagus nerve are actually coming from your body, primarily the gut, back up to the brain. So the gut sending signals to the brain, actually 90% to 10% coming from the brain to the body. I find that fact fascinating. Stress heavily impacts the function of the vagus nerve. And so if you've ever given a presentation and you're feeling a little nervous and you have to like run to the bathroom before you do the presentation. You've experienced what this feels like. You had a emotional or psychological stressor, and it made you go to the bathroom. You can actually have the inverse effect, and it can actually, so stress long-term, chronic stress, can be constipating. It can impact the signals coming from your brain and your gut and your gut and your brain. So I just went through 11 different reasons why you might be constipated. So let's just like bring this all together for a second. So there's a number of different reasons that you may be constipated. In fact, I just gave you 11. So getting to the roots is the absolute key to correcting the problem. So if you're wanting support to figure out what's going on and how to overcome it, I've been doing exactly that for the last 15 years. So my program, the Gut Balance Method, helps women fix their guts so they can poop regularly without straining and feel good in their bodies again. So in the comments, I would love for you to share a key takeaway that you had from this video. I'm sure many of those reasons you've never heard before, or you've never actually thought about being connected to what's going on for you. So I would love you to take just a second, drop a comment below the video and tell me, like, what's one key takeaway you had from this video? What are you gonna pursue? What question do you have? Right? So drop that in the comments. And then I want you to dive in. I want you to address these things in your own life. I want you to do something about it, because constipation is not something that you have to live with. Constipation is a problem because it's not just a problem because it makes you feel awful. It's not just a problem because it leads to gas and bloating and a distended belly and just generally feeling lethargic and tired, but there's like downstream effects. It leads to small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It leads to leaky gut. It leads to immune dysregulation. It leads to autoimmune diseases. It leads, like, there is a cascade. So if you don't address the problem, like many of these, so one of these things on this list might be the case for you, or many, right? It's different for everybody. But the thing is if you don't address it, it's going to continue to get worse. It's not something that's just going to like magically resolve on its own. I know for me, I struggled with constipation for years and years and years. And it wasn't until I removed some of the food sensitivities, I cleaned up my diet, I changed the way I ate, I cleaned up the body products and the chemicals that I was using in my environment. I had a much better relationship with stress, right? It took a number of different things to actually get rid of the constipation for good. But I haven't dealt with it for probably 18 years, which is pretty awesome. So I would love for you to share your comments in the box below, and we'll catch you next time.